Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Neal, in for Jerry Willis. Here's a question. What does it cost when you criticize President Obama and his economic policies? The answer may be over $20 billion. That's what someone's paying. We'll explain. And Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg demands more privacy. No, not for you, but for him. You, in the meantime, are about to lose more privacy on Facebook. Also tonight, Monica Gate Part 2. Sexual harassment in the workplace, illegal, right? But a judge rules it's okay in some cases involving interns. Our legal team will tackle that issue. The Willis Report starts right now. We found out today what can happen when you're a top-notch CEO who openly bashes the Obama administration. It's going to cost your company big time. J.P. Morgan Chase said its legal costs in defending itself in a slew of federal investigations will total at least an astonishing $23 billion and could go even higher. This for a bank that our government thought it necessary to risk billions of taxpayer dollars to bail out. Now, the bank's chairman, CEO Jamie Dimon, has been one of the few CEOs bold enough to criticize the White House's economic policies, and that has made him a target of sorts. With me now, we've got Wallace Turbeville, a former Goldman Sachs vice president, who's now a scholar at a liberal think tank called Demos, and Neil Weinberg, editor-in-chief of American Banker. Guys, to start this off, I want you to look at something here. We want to make a chart of the different agencies investigating J.P. Morgan. There's so many, we couldn't fit them all on the same screen. The SEC, the CFTC, the Justice Department, Federal Reserve, and look at this next screen. We got 1, 2, 3, 5 more. We got 10 agencies, and it doesn't even mention the FHA or the many state investigations. Now look at what the Wall Street Journal editorial page says about it. Quote, Washington is looting J.P. Morgan and may yet string up Jamie Dimon as a lesson in what will happen to any banker who dares to disagree with his Washington bosses. Guys, good storytelling needs conflict, so let's start with a lot of conflict from Wallace Turbeville. What do you think of that point of view? What do you think of the idea that this is really at some point a witch hunt?
Thanks for having me on. I would actually have a completely opposite view, as you might have guessed going into this. I actually think that the whole criticism and the fact that Jamie Dimon has been so out front in the resistance to reform of Wall Street has really caused him to create a whole sense of defiance against regulators, and that's really what's happened. If you look at the reports that were done on the London Whale case, it's very clear that Dimon has created a corporate culture where regulations are not to be followed by the letter and the spirit of the law, but to be avoided. And I think that's really what's gone on and why they've gotten such. And by the way, you left. I didn't see the chart exactly, but there are several countries, other countries
investigating J.P. Morgan as well. Yeah, pile on, guys.
I don't think he criticized the Chinese leadership.
And yet, Neil Weinberg, you know. So J.P. Morgan takes its own money, and it's got the London Whale, and it loses $6 billion, which is a pretty good lesson about risk. And yet the government comes in on top of that and fines them almost $1 billion more. Why fine a bank for losing its own money? What is that?
Obviously, it shouldn't be illegal, or you shouldn't be fined for losing money or for taking risks.
They were.
But in this case, what the government is saying is that Jamie Dimon or his bank was not being honest with the government. I can also tell you, I think this is, you asked if this is a witch hunt, Dennis. I think this is half a witch hunt. I think clearly there are some people who don't like the fact that Jamie Dimon's been speaking up. But we've also been looking at American Banker at some of the things that the government is going after. We were there in some cases first. And I think that there's some fire where the smoke is coming from. Example, they were trying to collect from people who are delinquent on their credit cards. They did not have the records to go after these people. It was extremely dubious behavior to either sell this to collections agencies or have their entire whole infrastructure of lawyers around the country suing people when they didn't have the goods on them. They have since shut that down, and they're in trouble. That's one of the investigations going on with the OCC.
Yet, Wallace, yes, sir. In the entire meltdown, J.P. Morgan was one of the good guys. They didn't trade in synthetic CDOs that fed that meltdown. They agreed when the government said, will you please buy Bear Stearns, and was it WAMU, because they're going to go bankrupt without you. And then 70% of the offenses in one particular investigation is all the companies because we bought them, you asked us to. Why are we picking on J.P. Morgan more than Citi, which screwed up horribly?
If you go back and listen to what was said by the management, Jamie Dimon and others at J.P. Morgan, at the time Bear Stearns was acquired, they were giddy about that transaction. And in fact, they've made
My
a
point
fortune.
remains.
They make a fortune on it. They bought Bear Stearns for roughly the value of its property on Park Avenue.
No, but what about my point that these were guys who did something right, and yet we are singling them out, and we're about to destroy them?
Well, we're far from. J.P. Morgan has traded up today. They actually are profitable, more profitable than Wall Street expected, but for the legal costs, they're in no danger of going down. I think the point here is that that J.P. Morgan actually benefited hugely from the bailout. While all these other banks were
that's
earning,
why we should punish them.
They should be punished for things that went wrong.
Okay.
And one of the things that
Dennis,
went wrong.
also,
Go ahead, Neil.
the part of the witch hunt is what you're saying, because yes, he was a hero during the financial crisis, came in with Bear Stearns and WAMU purchases. That was good, and now he's getting slapped for doing that. But also, don't forget, Bank of America bought Countrywide, and that was voluntary. They bought Merrill Lynch, and they paid about $50 billion to settle problems with that. So you can't say that only J.P. Morgan's getting kicked on that.
But in the case of J.P. Morgan Chase, guys, when a bank in the worst meltdown since the Great Depression ends up losing more money, not in the meltdown, but in the aftermath because of federal investigations and penalties, isn't there something wrong with our system?
There could be something wrong with the system. There could be something wrong with J.P. Morgan.
And you've got to also take into consideration J.P. Morgan was bailed out too.
They didn't need it. And they paid back every penny plus interest plus profit.
I think the best way to think of it is that the whole system, whether it was money market funds or currency swaps, the whole system was about to melt down. So even though J.P. Morgan didn't necessarily need an infusion then, they benefited for the whole system being.
Well, by that logic, we got bailed out too, Dennis.
Yes, all consumers. Well, here's the thing, though. We've seen meltdowns in the late 80s and in 2000 and in 2008, and every time government has to find a few culprits to make them the poster child and to kind of beat up on them so we all get our moral lesson here. What about a Wall Street amnesty? What about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And let's just stop all this, because I feel like we're bleeding the very banks that we had to bail out to save the system.
I think the bigger problem there is the way we're bleeding the banks with regulation. As I said, I think there's some validity to some of the government investigations against J.P. Morgan. Not all of them, some of them. But I also think that the regulation is just going to strangle our financial system.
I think that the regulation is going to shrink J.P. Morgan and some of the other banks by forcing some of the reckless businesses they do out of those banks. I think that's true. I think that's a very good thing, as a matter of fact. And I think that the fact of the matter is we don't need a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. No one, more than the Fabulous Fab, higher than the Fabulous Fab, has ever been really prosecuted in any of this. So the fact of the matter is...
Which should be a clue to you that there wasn't true criminal activity going on.
Or that the government the situation was so bad and so tenuous that they were afraid
Dennis, there's one other point.
Upsetting the apple cart.
Right.
There's one other thing that's going on here. You have regulators, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is one, the SEC is another, who were played as fools during the financial crisis, who didn't see anything going on under their...
Now they act like they could be the ones to fix it, that they know better about risk than J.P. Morgan does. And what I worry, Neil, is that what we're really doing here is the wussification of the American banking system. We are making them so they're too afraid to take risk, not because they're going to lose money, but because they're going to get to pay even more in fines. We got to wrap, and you know what? I'm taking the last word on that one because I can.